Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Conscious Health Podcast. You have your host, TJ, and I'm here with my good friend, Shanel. Shanel, go ahead and introduce yourself to the world and tell us what you do and why you do it, why you help people in the way that you do.
Yeah, my name is Chanel. I'm intuitive and I uh, have done some things to help me kind of understand how emotions and psychology and patterns work. And what I like to do is I like to help people basically learn to identify their emotions and then help them release them. I believe really strongly in the power of energy and the power of positive thought, law of attraction. And sometimes it's hard to attract something if you don't know what's blocking you. And not that we want to focus on the block, but I like to help people find and identify enough of those blocks so that they can not give them power anymore and then move forward, just basically so they can be their best self.
No. Awesome, man. Good explanation. And I wanted to give a backstory for all the listeners today, too, on how me and you ended up meeting. So, back in the day, I used to be a Mormon missionary. And so basically how it went down was I think I talked to you like once at a church party for Christmas, or I think it's Halloween actually. I think I talked to you for like a minute. I just introduced myself, you introduced yourself, and that was it. And then fast forward probably a few months later, I was it we were helping you move in? I think that's what
Yeah,
it
in
was,
the
right?
same apartment complex. Yeah.
Yeah, so you ended up moving in across the way, so we helped you move in. Um, I think again, I only maybe only talked to you for a minute or two, and then a few months after, yeah, I think it was a few months after that, you asked me, and so when you're more missionary, you have what's called a companion. So it's basically you can be two or three guys all together teach people Jesus Christ, and so then Chanel called us over, and we came over to just say a prayer together, and then all of a sudden, Chanel was we had asked her a question or another, and all of a sudden Chanel just went through all of us, and she told us all about our lives and just told me things that I knew were true about myself, but because being the average American man that isn't as aware of his emotions and isn't aware of what is actually going on in the subconscious mind, you were able to tell me things that I knew were true. I could feel it in my bones, but it was things I hadn't been aware of until you had brought them up, bring them to life for me to heal them. So, and ever since then, it started this relationship, me and you, where you've been able to not only be a friend but a therapist, helping me to be able to um, see myself in a better light, I guess, and to bring more clarity. And that's really my mission here is to help more men have that experience like I've had with your help to be able to heal and to see, okay, why am I feeling a certain way? Um, how are these emotions coming up all of a sudden? And how does all this stuff work? And so that's basically the I'd say the role you played in my life, helping me to heal and to be a better man. And for that, I'm very grateful. So I'm able to have you on here and to tell everybody else about it. I know is there anything you would add to that story?
No, I feel like well, I guess a little bit. You said it well, but I also would like to reiterate how much you've helped
Yeah,
me. Like we've had a really lovely friendship and you're intuitive to watch it grow has been fun to watch, but then also as a result, I've also got the um uh bl like blessings, I guess, if you will. I've
yeah,
got the fruits of your uh healing as well, so that's been really nice.
yeah, yeah. And I think like now that I think about it too, I really think that's the way it should be with anyone who finds a therapist or a healer, if you want to call it that, someone to help you. It should be a mutual relationship. I think it's good to not have a relationship where it's like I remember when I first met you, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's a, I don't know what's the word, but she's this energy healer that can I just step in her house, and all of a sudden she's able to do this and heal me. But I think that early perception I had was it was a little off, and I think as I matured more and our relationship grew, I was able to see like, oh, this isn't just a you're some wizard where I go and you heal me. It's where we have this mutual relationship where we both heal. And I realize I'm actually the one healing myself. And
Yeah.
it's me that's the creator of my life, and you're the creator of your life. And so
Yeah.
I think maturing into that has definitely helped too, to realize we're all capable of healing ourselves. And but sometimes we do need a guide to help us. That's what you've been for me. Um, one thing I did want to add too to that story, I think one of the first things that you really helped me with, um, something I wasn't aware of that was really holding me back in my life, was anger. So I remember that was like one of the first things you pointed out. And I think traditionally I'd always been that nice guy, if you want to call it that, where
Yeah.
I was always letting people do whatever they wanted. I would just be like always calm and chill. But then I realized there's all this anger sitting in me. I didn't know how to express it. And I
I
think
remember
that,
those just like
yeah,
in here, I could feel it like, ah.
yeah, and that's one of those things too. It's like as I've worked on that, I've seen that with other men that I've helped, that I've talked to, that they're in that same phase where they're like the Mr. Nice Guy, where they kind of let everyone kind of do whatever, and they don't really speak the truth. They have all this like, oh, they're all constricted with all these negative emotions and anger. So it was interesting as I stepped more into the creatorship of my life, and I worked on expressing that. Then I had years and years of temper tantrums and different things I had to work on to be able to express that in a healthy way. And I think that's something a lot of men go through. Is there any advice, like through you helping me, is there any advice that you would give other men as far as them working on like really heavy emotions like anger?
One is be prepared that you're going to do it. And I say that because when it comes up and when it starts to boil up, we want to run away because sometimes it's big and it's heavy and it's hard. I don't like to be sad. That's probably the one I hate the most. When I get sad, I get sad. I get sad about being sad. I mean, it
Yeah,
compounds. And and so one, and not in a daunting way, but just recognize when the emotions are going to come up, you have to go through them. You can't go get over them. And and uh and you can't prepare your setting perfectly, but recognize where you're at, what's going on, who's going to be around you, who's going to be able to encourage and be safe for you to process through these emotions and things like that. And then just for self, one thing to recognize is this is always kind of a something to get used to. But if let's say you're feeling angry, you're feeling angry and you're like, I don't know where to go or what to do with this, people will start popping in your mind, but it'll be almost this like thought way over here. And you're just, so you're just mad, you're going through whatever, and then start to think about what you're thinking about. Because if all of a sudden you're like, I don't know why, but Joseph from seventh grade is on my mind today. Well, you should probably look at the fact that Joseph from seventh grade pissed you off somewhere, and that's
yeah,
adding to that anger, and it's ready to come up and out. And if you can start recognizing those patterns, it actually makes it easier sometimes to release and let it go because the body is a perfect pharmacy. It wants to do it for you. And then
yeah,
and other times you'll have to sit and ponder on it. You'll have to sit and kind of lean into it like, gosh, why am I so mad? And almost logic yourself out of it
yeah,
in a sense. Not in a way of, gosh, this is stupid or dumb, but in a way of, okay, I recognize that so and so did this, but I know their intent is not like that. So why does that make me angry? Do I feel uh like they're disrespecting me? Okay, if they're disrespecting me, are they really disrespecting me, or do I have a fear of being disrespected? And you gotta and it takes practice, but you gotta kind of just like break it down, break it down, break it down. And then sometimes you can get to that root of like, oh, my insecurity is XYZ. Or when I was 5 years old, this happened and it sent me on a trajectory through life of feeling like I will always or never get XYZ. If I explain
yeah.
well.
Yeah, no, that's a good explanation. And I like what you said too at the beginning, where it is all about being prepared to go through the emotion, because like one phrase I heard months ago was the only way out is through. And so it's true, because you can't and like I'm speaking from a lot of personal experience, there's a lot of times where an emotion comes up and I'm like, I don't want to deal with this. So I push it back down. And then because I have all these emotions pushed down, I'm like, I'm gonna go work on my to-do list. I'm gonna go work on the car. I'm gonna go like these usual masculine things that I think a lot of men like to go do when maybe they're talking to their loved one, their partner, and then they have something gets triggered. They say something that start that the anger comes up, and either they lash out or sometimes they want to hold it in, and we're just like I'd rather just go do this, or I'm gonna go do this instead, and we kind of wave it off, and we're like, oh, not a big deal. But of course, it starts a pattern of just holding in things and never actually speaking up about it and speaking how we actually feel. And so that's something I've had to experience a lot. There's something else I was going to say to that, but I forgot what it was. But yeah, but but I like what you said though. Like just it's all about getting through. There's not a single emotion or a perception behind that emotion that you're going to get away from because it's going to build up in you, and you do have to work through it. And that's what I've helped a lot of men to do, where they're like, well, I feel this certain way, or my stomach is all clenched up and it hurts. And of course, as a personal trainer and a nutritionist, I look at those things. But a lot of times I realize, and this is why I started getting into more of this work too. A lot of times I realize, like, wait, this isn't just a food thing or a lack of vitamins. This is actual anger. This is an emotional thing. And I think a lot of people don't, men specifically, because we're raised in an environment where we're not, our sometimes our emotions are more pushed down. Because of
Yeah.
that, we don't realize that's actually the issue. That's underlying a lot of other health issues.
Yeah. And and recognize when you're going through something, like what is there to assist you and then what is there to distract you. Sometimes they can look like the same thing. I
Yeah,
went through a heavy process this last weekend, and so I had 2 days off. And the first day I wanted to go into the mountains bad because I love the mountains. But it was intuitively, I just felt like, no, that was not a good idea. So I sat home and I sat in it and I felt bad.
yeah,
I didn't like it. But then the next day, and I was prepared to sit at home, okay, like another day, just take and think about it, do what I need to do. But then the next day, then it was intuitively, I felt like, no, now it's time to go to the mountains. And it was exactly what I needed both days. And so the mountains, the first day would have distracted me, but the second day they were complementary. And then vice versa, staying at home that first day, just leaning into it and letting it be, um, was complementary. But if I'd done that the second day, nope, nope, hard
right.
no.
Yeah,
So
well, wouldn't have worked out the same.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
and it's funny you say that too, because that's something actually I've had a lot of experience with lately, is where I realize certain activities, and for me, I'd say actually just about any activity you can actually use to work the motion. So, for example, lifting weights. Like I've had plenty of times where I'll have shame, like oh, I'm too skinny or ugly or whatever it is. So I'm gonna go lift weights to build more muscle and try and look better and hide the shame. And so like I've had experience where I've done that. And then I've also had different times where I'm like, I'm still gonna go lift weights and I am gonna build muscle, but I'm gonna do it while also being expansive, being loving with my emotions. And I'm actually gonna pay attention to how my body feels and how my emotions, um, I'm gonna work on processing them as I'm lifting weights. So I'm actually doing all those things at once. And for me, that's basically with anything where it can be used as a distraction or it can be used as something to actually heal. And so that's something like my most recent client whom I worked with in this past year. So first it went from, okay, I need help working out because I'm pre-diabetic and I have all these health things I need help on. So I helped him with that. After a while, we started putting in the meditation with it too. And then so it went from him just telling me, oh, like I had lost this much weight, which is great, which is wonderful. But then as time went on, he'd be like, okay, I've lost this much weight. And now when I lift weights, I have this Kundalini feeling where I'm feeling this energy going through my body. And so it's like as the time went on, it started becoming more, he got the idea that working out can be more of a meditation than it is just simply lifting weights just to lose fat and build muscle. And so that's where I like to help people with, is to, especially men, to realize that like there's a lot of good activities out there, but what is your intention before the activity? And so that's
Yeah,
something I've seen a lot of cool things with in my own life and other people's lives too.
that's cool. I've had that with running. I like to run, and people talk about the runner's high, and they talk about getting into the runner's high, but you have to be going for a long time. I can get into the runner's high super fast because the same, like I'm already uh I'm already, in meditation mode, and then just
Yeah,
running. It's just my body is moving and my brain's like, oh, going wherever it's going.
yeah, yep.
Yeah, I get that. It's cool.
Yeah, and I think and something too that's been big for me in this past year too. So actually, I wrote a small book on this. I think you may have read it, but there's a book about emotions, just a simple, very brief guide on how to tell what you're feeling and how emotions work. So something that's been very helpful for me is realizing that um, like I try to label emotions as maybe good or bad because, of course, if you label them as bad, then you don't want to feel them.
Right.
And so something that's helped me is to realize instead of saying it's good as bad, realize that either if I feel happy and loving, for example, I feel expansive, like I feel like a weight is off my chest, or I feel forgiving or peaceful, whatever. And so I'd call those positive emotions. And then when I feel negative emotions, it's more constrictive. It's the opposite. I feel like everything's contracting, like there's maybe my throat will be tight, or my chest will be tight, or both at the same time. So whatever it is. And so from there I go, okay, so I feel constricted, so it's a negative emotion. And then from there I can kind of reverse engineer and see what I'm feeling. And so that's been something that's been helping me lately too, and other people I tell to as well, is that's been a great idea to help me to be like, okay, instead of seeing this negative emotion as bad, I need to stuff it down more because, of course, that contracts even more. Instead, I go,
Right.
okay, what am I feeling? Let me give it space to come up in a healthy way, of course, but let me give it space to come up so I can actually heal and feel more expansive and more loving.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's cool too because with that concept, it is recognizing even with those negative emotions, again, what they mean. So for example, as I've worked with men, this isn't across the board, but I do tend to notice men will pull towards some emotions and women will pull towards some emotions. Um,
Right.
but in that, if you're processing through emotions and then you start to feel vulnerable, you feel like you're doing good, you're letting go of it, and then you're feeling vulnerable and you want to shrink back down. Take a moment and recognizing, am I starting to feel vulnerable, or is this the feeling of vulnerability that is also coming out of me that I need to let go of?
Hmm.
And so when you were talking about the expansive constrictive, I was thinking about that because sometimes the constrict is part of the expanse because, you feel like, gosh, am I being dramatic? Well, maybe it's the feeling of drama coming out of you because somewhere you already are dramatic, or
Yeah.
and so those ones are a little subtle, and that concept took me a few years into my journey to recognize. And I'm not saying it'll take everybody that, but there'd just be times where I'd be like, I was purging through anger and sad, and now I just feel sheepish, and then I'm like, oh wait, because I'm also purging sheepish, and so
Yeah. 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 That's another thing too. It's like sometimes you have so much coming up that it's like you got to kind of pinpoint all these different things you're feeling at once. I
yeah,
think one thing too that's helped me a lot lately is just realizing that um and then correct me if you have a different idea about this, but to me it seems that every emotion has some perception behind it. So it's like if I have a certain perception going on in my head, then it causes an emotion in my body, because like Joe Dispenza says, the emotions, the feelings are language of your body, and then thoughts are language of your mind. And so for me it seems there's always some perception. It's not just like if I felt sad for a week straight, for me it doesn't, it's very rare that it's ever some just outside thing. It's my perception of whatever the thing is of life itself. So it's basically what I'm trying to say is your issues in life aren't always, if ever, outside of you. It's always your perception about life, and that's causing the emotion to come up, which is showing you, hey, you're off your natural way of being here because of this perception that you have that is that's causing you to shrink or causing you to feel scared about life.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's cool too when you begin to, and going back to another thing you said where you talk about you're the creator of your life, I am the creator of my life. And then we come together and we co-create.
Yeah.
And like anything, you have to get used to doing it. So for anybody listening, if you're just starting on your healing journey and you're like, this is insane, I can't do this. Well, in 5 years, 5 years is gonna pass and you're still gonna have it in there or you're not. And
Yep.
it's okay, whatever decision people make. Um, but that feeling of not knowing what you're doing, that's pretty darn natural. And healing, like anything, takes practice. Um, I remember when I first even came across the idea of the law of attraction, what you think about is what you get, blew my mind. And because it was such a foreign thing to me, it was not something that was even an inkling of a thought. So so I'm living in that like, whoa, I am the creator of my universe. Here I am. I've done it. I've cracked the code. And then the emotions started, and every block came up, and they still come up. I mean, it's been a couple decades, but they still come up like surprise, surprise.
Yep.
But they're less and less and less. And it's cool because the balance of we're gonna say negative to positive emotion definitely has shifted. And it's cool to see how we really do create our reality in the tiniest things. And then it's
Yeah.
cool to see how it comes through in, where you think about like, okay, I've been manifesting this one thing, I'm processing through my emotions to get there, but then you notice the like the subtle things that helped create it. Why doesn't mine look the same as so and so who's manifesting the same thing? Well, because you
Yep.
had two subcategories that they didn't have. And so bringing it back to like processing through your emotions is a practice. It's a practice that you become your own creator for because you're the one that has all your emotions. Other people can get it right. When you say I'm frustrated, I understand. I know what frustration feels like. But why are you frustrated? Because of your story. Now, that doesn't mean we can't relate to each other because, if it's connected to, my I don't know, some bully in school or something, and I had a bully in school, again, there's a relation we can absolutely have.
Yeah.
But what if my bully was a girl who was tall and your bully was a boy who was, super muscular or whatever? There's just enough nuances that it's cool that we can all assist each other in the journey, but it really is truly up to you to start to get rid
Yep.
of all the little cracks and crevices.
Yeah.
And not to get so hyper focused that you forget to live and have fun and everything, but we do create our own reality by all the
Yeah.
little thoughts and things we have. And once you get into the practice of it, man, it can be pretty fun because then you go into meditation mode. And there are times that I'll come out of meditation mode and I'm all, whoa, where am I? This isn't my reality.
A whole new person.
Right? Well, it's funny, and me saying it's not my reality is me like opening my eyes and being in the room I started in, and I'm all, how did I get in this room? Because I had gone to wherever I had gone to.
Yeah. Yep.
It
Yeah. I've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I had a few thoughts that came up when you said that. Like something I've noticed too is when you start to become, because really the idea is um being, once you're more mindful of what is going on, you realize that there really can't be you can't let a second pass where you're not aware of your thoughts because they're always, because you have one thought and the next thought's related to the next one and so on and so forth and goes on basically forever. And so you realize that there can't be 1 second where you're not aware, because you're not aware of what is happening right in this moment. It really is going to be a cause and effect for the next moment. And so that's some notice too, where it's like there's times you start in like a spiritual awakening or whatever you want to call it, where excuse me, you become more mindful, and then there's times where just like you have all these negative emotions come up that you just want to distract yourself. You want to close down, this in my experience where I've had times where it's like I don't want to be as aware as
Okay.
like I wish I could go back sometimes, but every time I have that thought, I realize that this whatever is coming up is worth it, no matter how uncomfortable it is. Because really, the only way out is through, and that's the only way where I'm gonna be a better man is to go through these negative perceptions or emotions or whatever it is. And so I've had that too, where it's like I've had times where I want to just quit. Basically, I'm like, like this is hard, this sucks, but I have to step into that the act of courage to be able to have faith to keep going, to go through everything that I've created in my own life and all my own problems, so I can turn them into solutions. Um, and, like one thing I was thinking of was what is it David Hawkins scale of consciousness? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think
I think
so.
yeah, I think it's David Hawkins scale of consciousness.
Oh, where the
Uh,
bar shame.
yeah, like you have the different levels. Basically what it is, it's a map saying it shows all the different emotions, and yeah, like shame, fear being like some lowest, and then like peace, enlightenment being some of the top ones. But something I noticed the other day, I was looking at it, and right in the middle is I think is courage. And so I realized that the other day I was like, because there's times where I'm not in a nice loving space, I'm not in a nice meditative mode, I'm scared, I'm all this stuff. And I was thinking today, okay, what is it really that makes me go from the man I used to be to the man I am today? And where's that tipping point sometimes when I feel scared and all that? And I realize that it's courage. It's taking even if I do feel fear, which is fine, is natural, I
Yeah.
still take that step to be courageous to go through whatever it is I need to go through. And I think at the end of the day, like especially men, we think courage like, oh yeah, we got this. I'll go into we sometimes we do these courageous acts for other people. We help other people. We do all these things. And I was like, oh wow, you're so courageous. But in reality, sometimes we're too scared to even look into ourselves. And I
Yeah.
think that's where a lot of people miss out on to be a better person sometimes is to we're looking outside for this and that and being really courageous sometimes in our outside endeavors, which isn't a bad thing, but we forget about going deep within ourselves and have the courage to be like, okay, why do I feel this way? Why do I have this anger, this fear, the sadness, whatever it is?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's cool because the better it gets, the better it gets. The other
yeah,
day, after coming out of my big purge, the end result of it was embarrassment. I don't get embarrassed very often. I don't care enough.
yeah,
Um, but I was so embarrassed, and then it kept growing and growing. And then my friend offered to do some body work, just move some energy. So she was doing that. I was so embarrassed about everything
mhm,
on the planet. And we found it so funny because she's like, whoa, this is strong and you never get embarrassed. And so it's cool because they say the better it gets, the better it gets. Is
yeah.
it as embarrassed as I was, just deeply like face red, non-functioning, I
Oh
mean,
wow.
relativity.
See, yeah,
Embarrassed.
it's hard for me to imagine you like that.
Yeah, but we found it so funny. We laughed a lot over it because of just how dumb it was. And
Yeah,
not saying emotions are dumb, but I could just feel it like this is nonsensical. There is no reason except for it's just ready to come up and out.
yeah,
It was a very funny experience. And so again, the better it gets, the better it gets, because then once those emotions do start coming, you can look at them, they're not as scary or as big or as whatever, and then you can break them down and
yeah,
sometimes they're easier to get rid of because again, you look at them and you're like, that's ridiculous.
yeah,
Not that you're ridiculous or you as a person, but you start to realize like, wow, I had that power over me. That was so weird.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think there definitely is like this divine humor in it when you realize you're the one that's actually stopping yourself
Uh,
from being a better person. And it's not sometimes we like to blame other people, but at the end of the day, it's actually our perception of those people or the object or whatever it is that we think is stopping us from just being a better person. Yeah. And so sometimes there is that like that humor in it, and they realize like, why am I'm taking life way too seriously. Like Like
Yeah.
life is meant to be enjoyed and to have fun,
Yeah.
even amidst having uncomfortable emotions. So
Yeah. And then it's cool to be able to have, um, I did a lot of my journey alone and it's okay. And then what's cool is on the other side, how I've connected with good people and good friends and that. And this phrase has been coming to my mind. I was going to mention it at the beginning of the podcast, but it keeps coming. So I'm just going to bring it up now. But
yeah,
I lift thee and thee lift me, and together we ascend. And what's really cool is, again, as you continue to heal, you, the general people, is that the people you do bring into your life continue to be brighter and lighter, and sometimes you might have to go through it alone. Again, I did for a lot of years and it was
yeah,
rough. But it was also what I needed, because I needed to break certain parts of my own attachments and things like that. But but then when you start getting to the better it gets, the better it gets. And you do have people where you begin to realize it is all me. And then it's cool that I have another person in my life that knows it's all them. And
yeah,
then we can high five and laugh about it.
yep, oh yeah,
Yeah, that one's also a nice touch with,
yeah,
just to look forward to if you're in a deep and heavy spot right now, and again, not just you, but speaking to whomever
yeah, yeah,
listening, if you're in a deep and heavy spot, just remember that, like, if you're processing through it, something does have to come out on the other side.
yeah,
And if it's heavy and you get rid of the heavy, lightness is the only thing that can continue to show up.
yeah,
So, and um, it's a cool journey. It doesn't always feel
yeah.
cool when you're going through it,
No, nope.
but the other side is always worth it, man. Always
Yeah,
worth it.
yeah. I heard a phrase of the day, and I forgot what exactly word for word it was, but there's something like the light is always strong in the dark. Like an analogy is like you go in a dark room, you light up a candle, even though the candle's like the flame is like that big, it lights up almost the entire room. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, with
that's
that
right.
being said, I guess did you have anything else to add before you
No,
give me a brief little reading? Cool.
no.
So yeah, I guess to help put what's the word here? What's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, I guess to practice what we preach. We can go ahead
Yeah.
and do a brief little reading session where you can, I guess, go ahead and read my current energy, and then if I have anything more to add, I can add more.
Yeah. I'd like to preface this with saying, again, for anyone who's listening, TG and I have been friends for a minute, so
Yep.
he's an easy one for me to pick up pretty quick. But so what I see with you is confusion, and not this mass chaotic confusion that like clouds your front, perceptions in front of you, and that like sometimes confusion just feels like this haze that just like sits right in front of your face. Um, yours is more of the way I see it is you've got a little bit of haze, but you do have this narrow little tunnel that you have intent on the other side. You know where you want to be. Your confusion is just how to get there. Where that chaotic confusion definitely has more of the feelings of like, I don't know what I want. I don't know where I want to be. I just don't know. This one has it's a gap feeling. Again, you've got a vision and you see the end, you just don't know anything in between.
Yep.
Um, the other thing, I feel a lot of peace around you. You've worked through a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of peace. And then there's a handful of things that came up that I'm like, okay, which ones are important? Which ones will lead to something deeper? So just kind of asking questions. But one thing also is honestly just to do with the podcast, just a hopes that it will get bigger and grow. Um, I'd like to preface this with you, but again, to people who are listening, we actually haven't talked a lot about your podcast. It's not something you've mentioned you've done
Mm-hmm.
it. You've invited me to be on it. I think it's come up in our conversations two or three times, little blips. Um,
Yep.
So, but what I feel with it is, with your podcast, you're hoping that it could be an avenue to help you open up and receive more clientele. Um, you also have high hopes that like the feelings that get off of you and it comes from your heart and comes up through your throat, which is your throat chakra, heart chakra, is
Yeah.
the feeling of you hope that you say things in a way that are easy for people to understand. You don't want
Yeah.
to say a bunch of words, yeah, and be confusing. And the other things I feel with it is that you genuinely want people to feel on the other side of the camera your kindness and genuine and love. Like that is very important for you. Like I feel it intenting very strong. You really do have a desire to be light and goodness. And then I feel like there's one more thing I can share. Safety. You genuinely want to be safe for people, which is another thing that you hope that you put out as you're putting yourself out there, which can be a vulnerable thing. Is that you're safe for people. That part of the reason why they draw to you or magnetize to you is because you put off the energy of, I am safe. I genuinely want to help you. I don't want to hurt you. Um, and it's really beautiful. All the right people will attract to it at the time that's right for them. But that's probably the biggest things I feel. Again, connecting with your podcast is just, I just see you being like, here's me on a platter. I want kindness and safety. All
Yep.
right. Shrug. Here you go, world. Take it or leave it, but I hope you take
Yep.
it.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, as usual, yeah, it's all very spot on. Yeah. I think, um, yeah, well, I'm not, yeah, every time we do this, I'm always like, where do I even begin? It's cool how you're able to pinpoint things like that. They're going in my mind, even though I haven't told you about any of
Yeah.
those specific things. Um, but one thing I did think about the other day, it's like, how you're only able to start reading other people's minds once you're able to read your own. And I
Yeah.
think that's something too I was thinking about lately is that all of us are able to have a gift where we're able to pinpoint things like that and help other people and to open up our heart to them and be open to this healing. But we have to be willing to have the courage to read our own mind. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, on all those points, you were definitely correct. I definitely do have high hopes for this podcast, and I hope that it reaches everyone who needs to hear it. And I hope that if you are listening to it, you learned some great things from this episode today, from me and Shanel talking, going back and forth about different things and what we can all do to be better people and just have the courage to go through the emotions that we need to go through.
Yeah.
Shanel, so what is some ways that people can reach out to you then if they need more help and guidance on just going through the emotional path and awakening spiritually?
A big one that would probably be easiest with, however far or wide this podcast reaches is email, honestly.
Cool.
Email's a good one, which is S for Chanel, Z for Zelma, which is my middle name, and then Rigby, Rigby, which, if you're wondering, that is a little town in Idaho. So szrigby@gmail.com. And
Cool.
that's I feel like that might be a nice way for, again, however far and wide this reaches, but it'll, um, you can immediately say the words and I'll get the words. So,
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, last time I checked, there's listeners in Australia, Russia, America, all sorts of places. So cool. All right. Yeah, I'll put it down in the description too for anyone that is curious. Awesome. Cool. Thank you, Chanel. I appreciate
you're welcome.
your time today.
Yeah, thanks,
Cool.
DJ. Thanks, too.
Yeah, you're welcome.